I guess we're good. All right. Good morning, everyone. Well, we had the intros, but why don't we just start really quick? And Peggy, why don't you give everybody a little bit of an overview of sort of who you are, sort of your view of what's happening in the marketplace today, and then we'll let everybody just sort of give a minute or so. We don't have that much time, so the 25 minutes is going to go by.
It's going to
fast.
fly. It's going to fly, especially with a topic like this. So, in a word, I write about the industry. I'm an analyst. I'm a writer. I write for Forbes. I do work as a mobile analyst at VentureBeat. So my observations are always going to be from sort of like speaking to people in the industry, not really doing it. What I'm seeing in the industry is that it's a great topic to discuss because everyone is talking about like the next new formats, the way that they need to be moving, and a lot happening that's probably going to just wash over us like a wave in 2020, I think.
Okay, exciting. Well, let's move it over to the practitioners. And Shay, why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of what you're doing now and maybe one thing that's really sort of got your eye in terms of emergence from a format-specific perspective.
I think one of the more interesting things that I'm seeing recently that got me more excited is a lot of the things that Snapchat are doing, taking offline to online through AR. I think that's definitely something that we'll need to start adopting within 2020 and moving forward, because that's definitely, hopefully, that's where everyone should go, because it's a lot more engaging in terms of ad formats.
And we actually did not practice this beforehand, but I think it's a really interesting segue for you, Philip, to talk about sort of a little bit of your background, sort of the segue from an AR, VR perspective, certainly, and some of the exciting things that are showing up on your radar.
Well, background-wise, I actually have been doing virtual environments I studied it 15 years ago, did my dissertation at an architectural school, ended up writing my dissertation about mobile gaming. This was on Java-enabled handsets, so that's what really got my career started with mobile. And I've been working on mobile, then smartphone apps and all that kind of jazz for many years. But as soon as Zuckerberg bought Oculus is when I founded my company for VR and AR, focusing on the mobile side of it. So none of these devices that are tethered to a gaming PC or anything like that. And now very much working in mobile AR because all the devices can now do it. Apple's on board, Google's on board. You have all the SDKs in place, and all with, of course, Snapchat is a massive one. They are making, mad revenues, especially the creators of these lenses. Now Facebook, Instagram's got it. So it's really how I see the formats changing for advertising from back in the day when it was WAP and sending SMSs. I gotta say it's more personalized. People want to see or want to be part of or engage with the advertising and make it personalized to where they are and what they're doing with their mobile device, their best friend.
And can you maybe talk a little bit about sort of industry specific? I think when I hear, and when we talked about sort of e-commerce, an ability for a user, both from a discovery, but also almost the sort of try before you buy, right? So it's an interesting corollary from sort of like a user acquisition perspective, because you're actually getting somebody almost all the way through the complete purchase funnel through an AR, VR environment.
Well, that's the crazy thing about the VR AR, because it's all spatially orientated, and you can, for retail products or brands, can really engage the user in the personal experience of virtual trying on. And magic mirrors have kind of been in and out. Amazon's working on it as well. So I think there's a lot of, even if it's just Amazon trying to say, okay, I want to place this stereo speaker Bluetooth thing in my on my shelf. Does it fit? Kind of thing. I think there's a lot of utility behind using this technology within advertising to make it accessible and personalized. That does it work for me? But also from the social aspect, the way the user adoption of Snapchat and Messenger and Instagram, people are engaged whether it's from the self perspective of the camera or looking out into the world. I think that it's a gold mine for places like Nike. I mean, I saw recently Nike within their app, you can try on a shoe. It's completely tracking your foot. Does it look nice? And then there's a call to action. Go, customize it. Try it with different colors. That kind of thing. It's really a nice way for brands to activate and engage consumers.
And does that resonate, Peggy, with what you're seeing and hearing?
To an extent. What I'm also hearing, though, is that it has to not be the shiny toy syndrome, right? Because the app has to fit the format. So to your point, it has to offer some utility. But in some cases, that's also going back to some other ad formats or sort of reigniting them. So what I'm seeing is a lot of new creatives around, for example, how we interact with apps. So different ways of when you swipe, or different ways of when you scroll, that the ad becomes sort of part of that activity, which I think is really exciting as well, because it's almost like native in the sense that it fits the experience, it's not interruptive. Companies like Verve as an agency are working on that, and some others. And also, with respect to the types of formats, a nod to you, not meant to be actually, but another really, really hot one is audio. That I'm hearing so much about app companies coming to me saying either they want to find a way to get into audio or simply just be part of the podcast, explosion. So it can be AR and VR when it fits, and I'm really excited about that. And there's a lot going on in Snapchat that I'm seeing, and brands you wouldn't think of being really successful there. But it's also, I think, of making that decision, what kind of app do I have and what would fit? And there are other, I think as long as it fits the interaction and the value proposition, the new formats are relevant. And there's, as I said, there's so many, because we're just beginning to even just take a look at how we scroll, and you can add ads in there, how we swipe. So there's a new frontier for all of this.
A lot of things on new frontier. Shay, let's talk a little bit about sort of today. Not necessarily what's old is new again, but talk a little bit about, from your perspective, what's driving sort of consumers' attention. What are you really seeing success with today in terms of how you're driving user acquisition? I think for a lot of people in this room, that'd be helpful insight.
So to resonate a little bit with what Peggy said, I think it's all about matching the ad format to the user experience, right? We need to make sure that we don't just take an ad like we used to do, just take a video and just post it everywhere, but take into consideration where the user is seeing it, right? If it's don't put a call to action on on something that needs a tap to move forward, right? For example, on Snapchat or Stories. But at the end of the day, I think a lot comes down to video and playables as the major drivers of today. But I do think that if we combine the both and try to make some sort of try to take that into storytelling and build interactive videos, I think that's definitely something very interesting that is starting to pick up, right? So get that engagement within the ad and try to hook the user into the story, and then tell your brand identity and take that into from the hook, right? So 3 seconds in, take them, and all the way through the entire funnel. I think that's very interesting.
Do you have any concerns around the ability to actually take it from the hook to close it out and actually do the tracking necessary to tie it back to whatever your KPIs are? Or how do you balance the old or the new, the old and the new, or what's branding versus more performance?
So I think I'm talking on a performance, right? On a DR basis only, right? So you can still track all these things. It's a little bit more challenging to find to see exactly what the chain within a playable ad, to track those. So it's a lot about A/B testing and doing, setting up the campaigns in the right way. But I think that's something that people are doing today. We've been running it for a while, and I think it's going well.
Philip, from similar perspective, how are we going to be able to do some of the measurement or tracking when we're talking about advertising in these really sort of emerging formats beyond sort of seeing how this Nike or my Adidas, fits on my foot, and this sort of classic sort of checkout? Are there other things that will evolve from a measurement perspective when we're talking about AR, VR?
Oh, definitely with time spent is one thing. If we're talking about specifically VR, we're going to have, there's a couple of companies working, I think even one association member here from Israel is also doing VR advertising in virtual environments to add branding into a gaming environment. I know a lot of people say that time is well past and never really worked. Gamers don't like that kind of thing, but at the same time, you could never really. It was kind of just a brand message out inside the game. Now you can actually use with VR eye tracking to say, what's the kind of brain impression that you're getting from this? How long are people actually looking or saw the advertisement or the video on a billboard in a virtual environment? I think there's a lot more to do with the way sensors in these devices and on your telephone are going to be able to, give you much more information and also be able to better place an ad onto a user's device. Where they are is going to be super important, or which device, with the whole explosion of Internet of Things that is going to come, everything's going to have a sensor, whether it's in your home or on a billboard or what have you. So I think it's going to be a lot to do with placement, and the tracking business will come in when you can actually pull this data from whether it's a headset, a phone, or any other device in the home or out of the home. I think those are the analytics that'll be really interesting for advertisers.
So there's a lot of interesting things there. I pick up on a few things, Peggy, maybe even you can comment a little bit about sort of how does this resonate, especially with the emergence of data and targeting. And I don't think you can have a conference and not talk about sort of, privacy. But, when you talk about sort of personalization, is this really going to work given sort of the current environment today?
I think it will work if the user understands the contract they've entered into, in a sense, and that was an interesting discussion we were having because, yes, I am American, but I've been living over in Europe now for 15 plus years, so I get the other perspective. And whereas you would say in the States, we say when we're at home, we're going to be advertised to, that's part of the experience. What I'm watching, what I'm actually researching and looking at is a lot of exciting data about Europe, where out of home plus mobile is going really well. So it's the idea that I'm out of the home, therefore I'm sort of like, it's open season on me. I'm outside, so I can be advertised to. So billboards and the interaction with mobile is very different. KPI is amazing because it's actually working. People are out and moving around. Advertised to, it resonates with the billboard. And so we're talking about mobile plus out of home. I think was anyone here was at Mexico, that was also a big deal there. So it's a very different approach of bringing sort of digital and physical together with mobile. And it works for certain brands, and there's a number of companies, a number of really good campaigns and case studies just showing that works, that this amplification effect of what I'm doing on mobile and seeing in the outside world works. And you had an interesting experience landing here. So
it works.
It's working in Germany for sure.
So when I landed Tuesday afternoon, it was my father's birthday, so I did my traditional sort of check-in on Facebook. Saw a Lego ad. As I was leaving the airport in the taxi, digital out-of-home sign as you depart, same Lego ad. Like, it can't be coincidence, right? We talked about this a little bit last night when we were sort of reviewing it. Like, that to me was a little bit jarring, right? Whereas if I was at home and I was looking on my phone and then, an hour later, I was on TV or I was on my desktop and I had seen that similar sort of path, like, I would have just expected, like, okay, yeah, I'm home. They understand I'm doing something to engage. There's this value exchange here, whereas
That was creepy for
It was a
you.
little bit
Yes.
creepier,
Okay.
but that was maybe also my first sort of real experience with digital out of home. Right, I think it's certainly a hot topic. It's a hot and emerging format, but that was my first real experience with it.
Yeah, there are a couple gaming companies that did that recently also at Gamescom, where you would, outside of where it was taking place in the Code Mesa, you'd see the billboards and then you'd go in and see the games and they were sort of interacting with each other. So I mean, different approaches, but the same result. I think it always just has to be relevant and fit together. And I'm sure that VR will come in there somewhere too, where I'm looking at the billboard maybe and then something's happening. I mean, there's a lot going on there. To your point, it's going to be really exciting because now the sensors are going to fill in all of the gaps that we can't really do right now in attribution currently. So you can see that sort of stitching it all together. So I'm excited about the future that you describe as well, I have to say.
Yeah, I love the technology, and I can talk about it till your ears bleed, no problem. But I also like the idea that advertising can be also the side of experiential marketing type side. The putting the user in the center of the format makes it really exciting. Whether that's like an example from the Dallas airport, it was a big digital signage, a big touch screen. You could select the Dallas Cowboy players that you wanted. They'd come into the photo and you could do a selfie. I mean, just simply brilliant type of marketing for a Dallas Cowboy fan. And hyper localized because it's at the airport, and or it's even was not only in the Dallas airport, but the people were traveling to, I don't know, if it was New York or Philly where they were playing the game. They can do that kind of stuff to like follow the users to where they want to experience content from their brands and that they're fans of. I think the use of technology is fine, but it has to fit.
Yeah, fit's a really interesting thing. Shay, one of the things we had also talked about, going back to sort of the data side from a targeting and privacy perspective. But I mean, what are you seeing work from a retargeting perspective today?
One of the things that we talked about personalization. We touched about it a little bit, and I think if you take we've heard through yesterday a lot about through all the retention talks about segmentation and how to enrich your data, and if you take that into reactivation. And retargeting, that's a huge factor, right? So it's about trying to build ads that will touch upon certain segments, right? So if you're talking about a lapsing customer, it's not like a churn customer that you haven't seen for 6 months. So you need to really make sure that you take the right ad and not try to generalize it. Because the more you generalize, the more you miss out on the best things. It's true to data everywhere, right? For user acquisition, retargeting, and creative as well. So it's about taking, building creative to fit segmentation. The way it's true on user acquisition, it's more so on retargeting.
From a practical application perspective, does that limit, the theme of what we've been talking about is sort of the emergence of formats, right? But based on what you're saying, are there constraints on how you operate today in terms of the formats or types of advertising that you can use to sort of drive to the KPIs that are important for you?
Yes, because obviously, you can't build unique AR or VR experiences per customer, and at the end of the day, today, video is king. So it's about, and it's easier to produce, and it's easier to duplicate and iterate on. So both in terms of the systems that support those ad creatives. So obviously, video would be easier to implement throughout your marketing stack. And it's easier. Creative teams that's the way they operate these days. So it's definitely very lenient towards video and even banners. I know that's might be a dirty word in innovation and creative, but even banners work.
Sorry, I just got to step in here because we were talking about retargeting, but targeting in the first place is only as good as the data you have on out of your inventory for where you're pushing all these advertisings to. And I think where we get this data from will be super important. How are we going to parse all this big data using AI? I think these are the really interesting things that might. I'm not a pro in machine learning or deep learning techniques or whatever kind of adversarial networks we're going to use to parse this kind of stuff, but I imagine the formats of the future will also have to take into account, where we're going to be pushing all these advertisings to. Does it make sense to be pushing it to these people? Will they engage with it in the first place? I think that the data is going to be a big player in the future, at least.
So is it just a matter of, it's not if, it's just when? And what is that a function of? Is that a function of cost, right? And do costs need to come down for, user proliferation of devices or ubiquity of how users are accessing these new and emerging environments?
Well, then it comes back to the whole data privacy thing. Will this data actually be used appropriately and within a proper legal context? I think for the most part, people are mostly fine with giving away their data, even though they don't know that they're doing it sometimes. So I think privacy concerns here in Europe are blatantly well too strict. I think GDPR was an overkill in the end, but most of the time it's just reduce the experience that you get. I have to click through all these goddamn pop-ups now, and I rarely take the time to say, okay, forget about the marketing, whatever. I think users are a bit more disappointed in the end from what the European Union has done here.
But if you think about it, something like the massive success of reward video for the gaming industry says to me that, if the offer is put together correctly, then, we will buy into it. So you could say, what about the data? Well, they're interacting with these videos because there's a different value exchange. It's not always just, get something for free or watch the ad. I mean, it just depends, I think, a lot on how we approach it. Do you have reward video?
Yeah, a little bit.
So it works for you, right?
Yeah, it definitely works. I mean, it doesn't. What we do in advertising and ad formats at the end of the day is trying to get a potential customer to perform an action. And video works a lot better on us as people because it's engaging and I can see a lot of things and I can tell a story and I can try to bring you into my world through video. And I think advertising has been doing it on TV for the better part of the last 60 years. So it's not anything new. It's just we utilize it in a different way.
We'll have to have a whole nother panel about TV advertising. So I think we're getting close to having to wrap it up. Any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with? I'll give each of you a few seconds to close it out.
I'd be happy to give my time for a question if there's any.
Perfect. Any questions from the audience?
Okay, never mind.
Still too early. All right, well, let's a round of applause for our great panelists and perspective, and thanks everyone.
Thank you.